Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Lindsay Nielsen. I'm the marketing coordinator for Eco Engineers. This webinar is really cool. It's something that we're really excited about. We have a panel of experts here to talk about carbon reduction and the American farmer. So before we get it kicked off, you will recognize this slide per usual. Everybody in the audience is going to be muted, but you can type questions into the chat function throughout the video. Per usual, there will also be a short survey sent after the webinar, and just telling us how we did and if you have any suggestions for future webinars. And you will all receive a link to this video once it is done processing after the webinar. So without further ado, let's get this thing started.
Carbon is the biggest disruptor of the 21st century, and the world as we know it is changing. Eco-engineers can guide you to make the best decisions as you navigate toward your clean energy goals. Our diverse team of carbon analysts, engineers, scientists, auditors, and regulatory specialists are trusted advisors of the clean energy fuel sectors worldwide. Clean energy regulations are a maze. We simplify them with an unbiased approach and fully manage your compliance. Modeling your carbon reduction is complicated. We quantify your emissions with a rigor based in science. Together, we can create markets that will protect and grow your investment. We create sustainable solutions for a better tomorrow. We are Eco-Engineers.
I'm Shashi Menon, CEO of Eco Engineers. That video you just saw is Eco Engineers in a nutshell. One of the biggest disruptive forces impacting businesses today is the uncertainty around climate change. Each week we see a new regulation, a new technology, a new lawsuit, and a new attempt to shape policies and market forces to deal with the increasing concentration of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. We also see extreme weather events that impact supply chains, markets, asset values, insurance costs, and people's lives. At Eco Engineers, we specialize in helping you navigate this maze. Our team has deep expertise in low carbon fuels, regulations, and carbon markets. We cover all alternatives to natural gas, gasoline, and diesel, from ethanol to electricity, and from renewable natural gas to renewable diesel. We monitor policies at the state and federal levels and several foreign countries, and we're instrumental in the successful build-out of carbon markets. We have a systematic approach to help you find your way through all this information. One, we deliver critical information to you when you need it through our training and education modules. Two, we perform rigorous life cycle analysis to measure your carbon footprint. Three, we help shape public policy that is based on science and sound carbon accounting. Four, we help you protect your investments by reviewing your risks and opportunities and helping you chart a path forward. Five, we manage your compliance through our data management systems. And finally, six, we audit and verify your carbon reduction claims. Today, we are bringing this entire wealth of experience and expertise to address a very important issue facing us, and that is, how does climate change and carbon markets affect farming? If America is going to lead the world in sustainable living, we need to establish a marketplace for farmers to sell products going through sustainable practices, and that is exactly what we're here to discuss today. Mark Heckman, our lead in farm practices, is going to moderate the webinar. And with that, I want to hand it over to you, Mark. Welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Shashi. And thank you, attendees, for showing your interest in farm practices. And I want to also thank the panelists that are here today participating. We've assembled a great field of experts. Kelly Neuenhaus, Ron Alverson, Tim Bay, Bill Northey, all these guys are farmers. Lisa Streck comes from a farm background. And as you can tell, it's farm focused. My background's also in farming. And these guys are going to share their experiences. They're going to share their vision of how these things may look in the future. We're talking today carbon reduction in the American farmer. These are going to be great opportunities in ag, and ag being the solution. It's going to give us a little bit of a different perspective. And so as ethanol plants, we'll have to take a look at our supply chains. Scope 3 emissions are going to drive all the way down to the farm level, and that's what we're looking at. So what you've got in front of you is the current flow, low carbon fuels flow chart of basically the commodity starts on the left, corn gets into ethanol, ethanol to the blender, And then the commodity gets all the way to the end user, with then the credits or the RINs being driven back through the process and financially benefiting the participants. We're going to focus on the front end of this because scope 3 emissions may require to go back down to the farm level and include supply chains. Here's a little bit of a slide that it's a little bit of a busy slide, but it's before we get to the plant. The crop and the corn still goes the exact same way. But with this slide, what we're trying to illustrate is the onus now rests with the farmer, and the farmer and the accountability, the responsibility, and even the money flow all comes back to the farmer. So with that, today, we are going to be turning to our panelists, and our first panelist, Kelly Neuenhaus, is going to talk about this. All these opportunities are also going to present challenges. I'm really excited about these opportunities that this panel is going to bring to us. With that, I'm turning it over to Kelly. Kelly is a Northwest Iowa farmer, runs a seed business. He's on an ethanol board, ethanol plant board. He is also very engaged with Iowa Corn. He's vice president of Iowa Corn. He's engaged with National Corn. He's connected. He has a farm. His farm is different than my farm that's in Southeast Iowa. But the point of all of this is all these farms in different areas are going to have different challenges, and certainly looking forward to the discussion. Kelly, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to be involved here with Eco Engineers on this video conference. But yeah, I farm in Northwest Iowa with two brothers. We have a corn and soybean rotation farming operation. I have a seed business, and my brothers have a trucking business. But you know, over the last several years, we've been trying to improve our farming practices constantly, and we feel pretty confident that we are very sustainable in our farming practices and done a good job of improving them. You know, we've got some heavy clay-based soils in Northwest Iowa, and it's usually cool and damp in the spring. So we've trialed with no-till and one-pass vertical tillage side by side. And we found that for our operation, the one-pass vertical tillage worked better for our production numbers, and still maintaining our residue on top, very minimizing our tillage practices. So through the combination of, we went to 20-inch rows on corn about 17 years ago, and with a higher population of corn, the reduced use of nitrogen actually, and the one-pass vertical tillage practice, we've increased our organic matter drastically through this practice. We had a lot of farms years ago that were 3 to 3.5% organic matter, and most of ours today are 5 to 6.5. So we feel we're sustainable, and I agree with you on, you know, not every farming practice works the same across the state because of soil types and variabilities. So looking into this carbon program moving forward, we need to make sure it's not a one process fits all, and let all farmers show that their farming practices are sustainable and are doing the right things.
Wow, just watching some of this, Kelly, on your farm, it's pretty impressive. The amount of cover that you have, and it certainly appears that, you know, comparing my farm to yours, it looks to me like you've got essentially the same coverage, and you've got, you know, the tillage pass. So the modeling of all of that. So it's looks like you're certainly doing a good job of doing what the intent is of no-till farming, and also raising a sustainable crop.
I have visited with one of our other panelists, Ron Halverson, over the past several years, and told him my story, and basically I would be considered a no-till farmer with our farming operation, and we do this on a little over 90% of our acres. The best thing we like about it is we don't touch hardly any of our production ground over the fall and winter months. We do a one pass in the spring and plant, and that's basically our cover crop, you know, maintaining our residue. And, you know, in our area, as you can see in some of the videos, we don't have a lot of roll to our ground. Wind erosion used to be more of an issue, but we feel pretty confident that we've reduced that drastically with this farming practice, and feel pretty good about it. So.
Yeah, wow, Kelly, that's pretty impressive. All of the stuff that you're doing on the farm, and now you're being faced with other carbon programs. And as you sign up for them, the challenges that the farmers consider. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, thanks, Mark, for having me on your panel today here with Eco Engineers. I guess my biggest concern for the carbon credits and carbon programs is, are they prepared well yet? You know, my personal opinion is I'm going to be patient and make sure everything's done right before I sign any contracts for any carbon credits. And I think the biggest part for me is that they perfect a scoring system for different farming practices, for the amount of sequestration your farm operations doing, both above ground and below ground. Right now, my plans are to be patient.
There's costs that are involved. How do you get paid for it? There's, in some places, I actually had a person tell me that green is money, and to them, so that's green farming to them. And but at the same time, there's a balance, right?
Yeah, I guess the key for our farming operation is we've always been trying to reduce our input cost, but yet increase our production. And, if the technology helps you to get things done properly, we feel we can do that. We've been raising really good crops, 250 bushel corn pretty consistently with 150 pounds of nitrogen. I think that's a big part of it. We're using more micronutrients in our fertility program, and we're actually reducing our herbicide and pesticide uses because of our farming practices. So, I've always said that my dad farmed better than my grandfather, and with technology, we're farming better than our dads did. And not that they weren't doing a good job, but just through time and learning and technologies, we can make these improvements.
Wow. And that's a great message. You're doing more with less. That's sustainable farming, at its best. How do we get that message out? I know we've assembled this forum to really talk about that, get it out there, and talk about how do we get compensated for what we're doing, but more so the message.
Yeah, I think this is a great part of sharing our message, is having these panels. But I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and if they question farming practices, the first thing I say is I raised my family here. My whole family's grown up here. We've been here for 3 generations or more, and we want to protect our soils and our water quality, and we're doing everything we can. There's always room for improvement. There's no doubt about that, but I feel pretty confident that we are very sustainable already today, and we've been sequestering carbon for generations. And I think it's time we get credit for that. And I'm confident that farming or agriculture is part of the solution to climate change, and definitely going to continue to be that way.
Wow. Kelly, that's a great message. I want to thank you for your time here today. Certainly, thank you for your time and all the activities that you're doing to promote, agriculture and ag as a solution.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mark. I enjoy it. It's a great message to share with as many people as possible. And our consumers need to know how we're doing our farming practices. And I'm happy to share that with anyone and everyone. So.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. That was really good information. Next up, we're going to hear from Ron Alverson. He is from Southeast South Dakota. He is a grain farmer, former grain farmer, farms with his son, and he is on the board of directors for American Coalition for Ethanol and also Dakota Ethanol. Ron, let's hear your thoughts on all this.
Well, thanks, Mark, for the introduction. Maybe just a little bit of background. I've been involved with the Corn Growers Association and the ethanol industry here in South Dakota since it really got going. When the California Air Resources Board started the low carbon fuel standard in California back about 10 years ago, Dakota Ethanol started looking at that market and started calculating their carbon intensity to try to capture some of the value out of that market. And at the same time, I realized that, even though they're not incentivizing and allowing auditing and verification for that market by corn producers, I started calculating, using the GREET model and calculating the carbon intensity of corn production on our farm way back when. So I'm real familiar with the model and know exactly how it works. Okay, just a little bit of background of the current life cycle accounting of biofuel greenhouse gases in those markets. Biofuel manufacturing and transportation greenhouse gases are audited and verified at each ethanol, biodiesel, and renewable diesel plant for use in the California LCFS and Oregon Clean Fuel programs. If total life cycle greenhouse gases are below fossil gasoline and diesel greenhouse gases in those markets, credits worth about $150 to $200 per ton of CO2 reduction are earned in those markets by these biofuel producers. As a result of these nice big incentives, biofuel manufacturers have made a lot of investment on low carbon practices, and they've reduced their carbon footprints in response to these incentives. However, biofuel feedstock production greenhouse gases by farmers are not audited and verified, and thus not incentivized. If low carbon biofuel feedstock production practices were incentivized like they are at biofuel manufacturing plants, I think biofuel feedstock carbon footprints could be significantly reduced. Okay, here's the current emissions profile using two different models, the one used in California and then the one that the US Department of Energy GREET model used. And this is what they call for a Midwest average corn ethanol. As you can see, the left pie chart, and it totals 71.8 grams per megajoule. On the right is the US DOE GREET model, and it shows 51.4, so a big difference. This difference is mostly the result of that California still uses an older analysis of land use change that calls for a 19.8 penalty for corn ethanol. California also uses a slightly older GREET model, and that results in some minor differences. But you can see that about half of the greenhouse gases for corn ethanol come from the manufacturing, and about half come from the corn production. Okay, here's the profile for the corn production part of each of those former pie charts. California comes up with about 32.3 for Midwest average, and the US Department of Energy GREET model, the latest model, comes up with about 26.9 grams per megajoule. And you can see that the greenhouse gases for corn production are dominated by nitrogen. The emissions that result from nitrogen manufacturing and transportation, the nitrous oxide emissions after nitrogen is applied to soil. So between those two, it's about three quarters of all emissions during corn production. You can see the various categories there. One at the bottom there is soil carbon sequestration. That doesn't show up on this, but it will show up on a subsequent chart as we talk about that a little bit. Okay, how might farmers reduce their low carbon footprint or their carbon footprints for corn? Number one, utilize low carbon biofuels in farm tractors, sprayers, combines, and trucks. The current models used in California, as well as the Department of Energy, assume that farmers do not use any low carbon biofuels. For instance, if farmers used biodiesel, high levels of biodiesel and or renewable diesel in their tractors, sprayers, combines, and trucks, they could reduce greenhouse gases by about 50%. They can implement precision nitrogen fertilizer management, what we call 4R, right placement, right time, right rate, and right form. This would greatly improve their nitrogen use efficiency, allow them to keep their rates just right, and also reduce the nitrous oxide emissions that happen when that nitrogen is applied to soil. Reduce tillage intensity to build soil organic matter and sequester atmospheric carbon in the soil. This is currently not accounted for in biofuel greenhouse gas accounting. The Department of Energy and CARB models assume that all biofuel feedstocks have the same exact effect on soil carbon. And there's not a soil scientist in the world that would say that. Each crop has its own unique impact on soil organic carbon, and corn happens to be one that's very good for soil organic carbon. So corn should really receive especially if it's done using reduced tillage, should receive a credit for soil carbon sequestration. Farmers could use cover crops to increase annual photosynthesis, and they can further utilize manure to reduce fertilizer inputs and build soil organic matter and carbon stocks. Okay, this is what happens when you put that all together. Say this low carbon corn farm in Webster County, Iowa, roll that up into the whole carbon profile for a ethanol plant in Webster County, Iowa. You can see it's way down there, down to 7.6 grams per megajoule for the entire life cycle corn ethanol. And for corn itself, it's down to 10.1 grams per megajoule. And you'll notice in that greatly reduced nitrous oxide emissions due to 4R, and added this soil carbon sequestration credit of minus 6.65. And I've also added for the low carbon ethanol, lots of plants are talking about capturing the CO2 from the fermentation at their ethanol plants and sequestering it into the ground in reservoirs. And this represents that technology too. So as you can see, nearly zero carbon corn ethanol and nearly zero carbon corn production. That's all the best practices.
Wow, Ron, those are impressive numbers. It's just incredible to see with technology and also using different modeling or modeling that's available to make this happen. So what do we need to do to get it from where we are to these kinds of models?
Yeah, well, actually, California Air Resources Board has started the process to start allowing farmers to submit their own carbon footprint or corn production footprint. So I think we're making baby steps to get that way in California and Oregon. It's going to take some time, probably a year or two, before they sort things out and get all the auditing and verification protocols in place. But it will happen, and I think it will happen for one very good reason. California really needs more low carbon fuel to meet their standard, their reduction schedule for their standard in the coming years. So, and they view this as a way to make that happen, to incent low carbon practices at the field level.
This is really good information, Ron. We're going to go next to our presenter, Lisa Streck from Bayer. As we continue carbon reduction in the American farmer, it's going to take all kinds of people. It's going to take all kinds of partners in this. And so we wanted to bring in someone from the industry that's got a voluntary carbon program to introduce that. And so to do that, got some good information on Lisa. She is the Carbon Business Model Grower Lead. And in this role, she's responsible for acquisition and ensuring a positive grower experience in Bayer's carbon program. She's been with Bayer for over 20 years and held roles of increasing responsibility in the supply chain and product management. She grew up on a family farm in central Missouri. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about this exciting program in the world of voluntary carbon?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Really excited to be with you guys here today and talk about the Bayer Carbon Program. So we're in year 2 of our program, so we are rapidly scaling the amount of acres to participate in our program after we learned from our pilot last year. So our program is simply incenting farmers to adopt climate smart practices such as no-till, strip-till, or cover crop. So as we've designed our program here at Bayer, we've really incorporated feedback from farmers throughout this process, collecting feedback from growers who participated in our pilot program. We've also recently established a grower carbon advisory panel consisting of about 20 growers across the country to help advise us on this program. So why did we do that? So we knew for our programs to be able to scale and have the impact on the environment and in the industry that we wanted it to, we know it has to work for farmers. So as we've built our program, we've really tried to build it through the lens of the farmer. and make sure that we've got really 3 key pillars within our program: certainty, simplicity, and flexibility. So the certainty comes from how we have incented farmers to adopt these practices on their farms. So like I said, our program covers no-till, strip-till, and cover crop. We incent growers for adopting these practices. So every year after verification and validation, growers can expect to receive a payment from Bayer for these practices. Simplicity. When you think about the tools that Bayer has available to offer farmers, particularly our digital platform with Climate Field View, where we've got over 90 million acres enrolled, it provides farmer with the simplicity to share their fields with us through the Climate Field View app and simply select the fields they want to enroll in the farm, as well as select those practices that they plan to implement. And then flexibility. So nobody knows farmers as well as we do here at Bayer. We work with them every day, sometimes even all day long. So we know that flexibility is important. So we've structured our contract with flexibility, and we've tried to give farmers the flexibility to participate on a field by field basis so that they can incorporate this on their farm in the best way that makes sense for them.
You couldn't have said it any better, Lisa. Farmers like it simple. If they do step by step what they commit to, they're going to get paid. That's awesome. And that's why I really wanted you to come on and talk about your program. If a farmer signs up for your program, how does that compete or complement some of the other programs that are out here, say with the LCFS or Midwest Fuels Initiative or any other programs?
Yeah, so within the Bayer program, right, our goal with our program is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So farmers would have the opportunity to stack other programs depending on what the eligibility of those programs are, which this is something that we encourage farmers to do, to look at some of those other programs, see what the eligibility requirements are, and see if they could potentially stack those programs on top of each other to really have the impact that they want to have, not only on their farm, but on the environment as a whole and from a soil's health perspective.
And it's all focused on practices, not necessarily amounts.
Exactly, and that's a key point when we think about the simplicity of the program. We're really focusing on incentivizing growers to adopt those practices. That way farmers don't have to worry about the amount of carbon they've sequestered. They can do what they do best, which is really focused on growing a crop.
Wow, this is really exciting. Certainly appreciate the time that yourself and Bayer's dedicating to these clean economy initiatives, and certainly look forward to hearing more of your responses to some of the questions that we're getting. I hope for all of Bayer's success in their program and as we continue to scale this up. Anything else that you'd like to add?
I would just encourage not only farmers, but other industry folks to go out to our website, bayercarbon.com, learn more about our program. We've got a really robust FAQ out there, as well as you'll see our 1-800 number where folks could get in contact with us to learn more about our program.
Thanks a bunch, Lisa. And now on to our next panelist. We've assembled this panel really to give people insight all the way around, and Bill's got some tips for farmers, also suggestions, and really he's attending the panel to give us his input. USDA Undersecretary to Farm Production and Conservation. Bill, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, and you've had a busy schedule the last few years, and certainly looking forward to all that you've got going right now.
Well, appreciate it, Mark. Thank you. And great to be back in Iowa. So I'm an Iowa farmer and served as Secretary of Agriculture in Iowa, still farmed on the side on weekends. And then 3 years ago, went to U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so was there in farm production and conservation. So farm programs, conservation programs, and crop insurance programs. Now back in Iowa and doing some consulting. As I came back, lots of conversations around carbon. And sustainability, and what's that all mean? And so I have a few things that I think it's important for folks to look for, and some things that farmers should work on. So as you look at kinds of the things that one of those questions I hear from folks is this real? Is it going to last? And I think there are some things to watch out there that would suggest to me that carbon has legs as an issue, so that sustainability has legs. Certainly, one of those is the Growing Climate Solutions Act. It passed the Senate, and I really think what it does is it says agriculture can be a solution, a voluntary solution, not a regulated solution. Lots of things for USDA to do, like figure out what a carbon credit is, put some frame around it, be able to describe it. Maybe it's like number 2 yellow corn. They provide a definition. We still sell white corn. We still sell waxy corn, other kinds of corn. You still have different qualities, but USDA has helped define what that is. Another might be that they will look at, take that as kind of a lead for them to figure out what a carbon bank is. You've heard them talk about a carbon bank. If that language gets a little more serious, that could mean USDA is looking at potentially buying credits. Maybe they define them themselves beyond what the market defines a credit as. Maybe they support the early adopters. There's this conversation that everything about carbon needs to be an improvement from where we were. Now, where we were, maybe where we are right now. Maybe it's 5 years ago with a look back, but it needs to be an improvement to get a reduction in carbon, additionality it's called, which puts those early adopters at a place where they can't get some of the things they have already decided to do. Now, they didn't do it for a carbon market, but USDA, I think, is looking at a fairness and trying to be able to help those early adopters, help the smaller farmers that can't accumulate a lot of credits, maybe put credits together, sell them to others, and then all the headlines around private markets out there. There's a ton of headlines around private markets. And then I think as time goes on, you're starting to see a little bit, you're starting to see some supply chain. So private markets buying carbon is companies out there saying, I want some carbon because of the changes you've made. Supply chain is when they say, I want your corn and I want a credit score on your corn, more similar to the conversation around low carbon fuel. That fuel isn't about, a long term, it's about that fuel was created with less carbon than other fuel. Can your corn be created with less carbon? Maybe it sells to an ethanol plant and they have a way of monetizing that. So my next slide really talks about what should a farmer do. So I don't think you have to be in a real hurry, but I do think you should take this serious and figure out how you get to the place where you're more sustainable as time goes on. Certainly we care about our soil quality. Let's look at more conservation practices. Hey, we encourage that a lot around water quality, around maintaining soil quality, other kinds of things. So these practices kind of work together in most cases, but try some of that. If you're not using cover crops, try cover crops. If you're using a few simple ones, try more complex mixes, try planting green, try no-till in an area that works for you, and so that when somebody comes to you, you're ready to be able to do that. And then look into those technology solutions. Maybe we will look at different ways of collecting data that'll make it easy for you to show compliance, whether it's on your combine or your sprayer, or remotely. Figure some of those out, look at some other tools out there. Maybe it's other ways of being able to reduce the amount of fertilizer we use and therefore gain some credit as time goes on. Figure out as time goes on, maybe what your own footprint is. How much fuel do you use? Let's figure out if there's a mechanism out there to say, how close are you to net zero corn? What would it take? Maybe you have a woodlot that contributes some carbon credits that could offset some of the fuel or fertilizer use that you all have. It'll give you some things to look at. So dip your toe in the water, figure out what's out there. Don't have to be in a hurry. And at the end of the day, right now, these markets are not large dollars. They're small dollars, but I do think they have an opportunity to grow over time. Certainly care about your productivity. Don't get so focused on this that you miss your weed control or miss marketing a crop at the right time. So take care of the finances on the rest of your operation. But I think doing some of these things will also help productivity in the longer term.
You know, farmers are asking for standardization. Farmers are asking for how do we play by the rules that might exist for an ethanol plant, and then also play by the rules as part of these voluntary markets. So how do you balance the public-private relationships in all of these, and how do we create these standards and disciplines?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really do think, Mark, that a lot has to be developed yet. Certainly we'll watch USDA and what happens there. We'll watch California Air Resources Board to see if they offer some opportunities for ethanol plants or others to be able to look at the different input of corn into a plant. I do think personally we need to prepare and figure out how we certify to somebody that comes to us exactly how much fertilizer did we use and what's different in different fields. It may be that they're looking for one field versus another because we treated that field different. And if we can't do anything more than say what my total fertilizer use was, or nutrient use was, or manure application was, then we may be limited on how we can comply. So I think our own records, first of all, they're important for us on the production side, but they probably will be helpful to whatever kind of form that compliance may look like over time.
Wow, Bill, carbon reduction and the American farmer. Certainly great tips for the farmer. And, you know, it's really great to have you talk about that today. And most importantly, Bill, thanks for your service. You've dedicated your life to helping farmers, and it's great to see you back in Iowa. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Our next and last panelist today is Tim Bay. Tim comes to us from Wisconsin. He's a professor of business development, energy specialist at University of Wisconsin. Tim's here to talk a little bit about the role of government, and he's got some really interesting things he's going to show us today that is happening, or at least working toward in the state of Wisconsin. So Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity. On June 17th, the Wisconsin legislatures, leaders from various committees launched a program, policy project, to investigate ways of providing more structure for the animal ag sector in Wisconsin. And this is structure around managing carbon at a profit. This next slide is a capstone of what this project's about. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, that's our beginning point, a conventional animal ag enterprise. We're focusing on animal ag in Wisconsin because of its importance to the economy, and that has been given a fair amount of attention by stakeholder groups concerned about carbon footprints. We start with the beginning point of a conventional animal ag, and the first effort in this project is to look to adopting a carbon accounting system statewide through a voluntary tax schedule. The merits behind developing that voluntary tax schedule is that, one, it's self-verified, hopefully very low cost, and two, remains the proprietary information of the farm. Now, the next four boxes, starting with on-farm energy, are tools in the toolkit. These are policy and rule changes that are being investigated and considered by the legislative committees to find ways to enhance the toolkit available to the farm. Adjacent to that on-farm energy is nutrient recovery and reuse. This may or may not include digesters, but we're looking at state policies to encourage more effective use of nutrients. In the upper right-hand corner, it says produce on-farm or source lower carbon intense inputs. This includes the carbon offset programs. I want you to kind of key on that carbon offset programs. I'll circle back to that later. And the last set is to develop a statewide carbon labeling program. Again, this is a voluntary program, but based upon the carbon accounting in the tax form, we're asking the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection to develop a capacity to calculate the carbon footprint for the farm. Again, that's proprietary information for the farm to use. Here's a busy but illustrative example of the potential impacts of these policy actions on the farm. The non-highlighted column is for the conventional farm. You can look at it at your own. And then the next column kind of highlights what the potential impacts of these policies may be. For traditional commodity sales, the market response, compliance to your buyer's expectations on carbon accounting may enhance the ability and to sell more product or retain a customer. The yellow cells are additional revenue streams from power sales, from biogas sales, from carbon offsets. The green cells reflect inputs, and they may be plus or minus the cost on the inputs, but the intention is to allow and encourage the farms to source lower carbon intensity inputs to reduce their carbon footprint. The final column to the right, highlighted in orange, are the targeted legislative and policy actions and which agencies are in charge of managing those rules. Let's peel the onion back a little bit and explore what each of these tools and metrics are about. The carbon accounting system is a voluntary tax form. We have a work group assigned to that that's actually headed up. One of the co-team leaders is Shashi Menon, CEO of Eco Engineers. And we'll be getting input from a lot of different stakeholders to develop this voluntary tax schedule that can be filed by the farm and provide the basis for calculating the carbon footprint of the farm's output. On-farm energy. We're seeking standardized commercial contracts. These are either PPAs, power purchase agreements, or agreements with the utility, shared savings contracts that include expanded revenue sources and net metering policies. Really, the two things that we're referencing here is the new FERC 2222 order that enables the distributed energy resources to participate in the wholesale markets, and in the state of Wisconsin, both discussions, open dockets on contracts and carbon footprint. Biogas. Any of you involved in the biogas space understands that this is the interconnection agreement with the pipeline, gas specifications, to what degree the pipeline has to accept gas is an evolving space. And a lot of these contracts are one-offs. We're seeking to standardize the contracting process, standardize the interconnection process, the gas specification process, and the tolling fees. In addition, we're investigating an expansion of the gas collection system. This is not the distribution system, but the gas collection system and infrastructure in the state of Wisconsin, really to expand the potential biogas producers, both in the ag sector and in the processing and wastewater treatment system. Carbon inputs and outputs. The first effort on this will be to develop a marketplace for farmer to farmer or farmer to business marketplace for those animal ag operations that are seeking to manage their carbon footprint, to be able to find like-minded suppliers that are also managing their footprint, and to be able to optimize their ability to reduce it. The other area addresses carbon offsets. And all of us in this space, all of us have realized an increased interest and activity in carbon offsets, specifically soil carbon sequestration. This slide highlights our approach, increasing the confidence level and addressing some of the concerns in soil carbon sequestration. The objective is to optimize this, to make it consistent across all participants and stakeholders, and increase the trust both in affiliated stakeholders and the trading community. The concern is the scientific basis for soil carbon sequestration and what the costs of verification of that sequestration or at the farm level. And the big question, as you can see here, we say is there confidence in the financial instruments? We're looking for a solution. USDA in recent announcements is going down this path. In the state of Wisconsin, we're going to hopefully complement what's happening at the federal level. We want to do whatever we can to learn from the RIN and the REC, the renewable energy credit from power producers, to learn from their examples, how those markets have worked, the liquidity, and seek to see if we can make this a confident commodity that can be traded routinely. Some of the fundamentals of this is setting a floor value for the offsets based on practices, practice changes, enhance the value of this, assign RINs to it through verification after the fact, and the eventual model would be to have these soil carbon offsets vary by region, by soil type, by practice, et cetera, actually reflecting what can be verified on the ground. It's an aggressive program. We have 5 work groups working on it. We have team leaders from the private sector and elected officials. And next week, we start rolling up the sleeves and doing the hard work, hopefully delivering a series of recommendations to the legislature by November.
Wow, Tim, this is really good. It's complete, it's concise. It includes parties that need to be part of it. It provides a structure. You got it really mapped out well. Well, I see we've got a lot of questions that are coming in, and we need to turn to that section of this panel discussion. So, Tim, thank you very much for the time. This is great insight, and we look forward to the question and answer session.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. So, Kelly, I think if maybe Ron, this question might pertain to you. Do you subscribe to the principles of soil health outlined in Gabe Brown's book, Dirt to Soil? And so Kelly or Ron, can you comment a little bit about that?
I guess I'll just make the comment that yeah, I don't subscribe to that, but I do try to follow the practices of the soil health partnership programs, and also I've been involved in the 4R Plus information this year as a crop scout for them, and sharing what we're doing in Northwest Iowa, and how I guess the biggest thing for my involvement with that is the testing of water quality out of my tile lines, and also the way I've increased my organic matter. I've had farms that we've increased organic matter by over 1 full percent over a 5-year period, and I've been told in the past that that's not possible, but we've been doing it. So just want to continue those programs. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, I can't say I'm familiar with Gabe Brown's book, so I hesitate to even comment.
All right. Anybody else have any comments on that, or I'll go to another question? Got a question, Lisa, maybe this one pertains to you. Can the panel, or anyone on the panel, can you comment on what party generates the carbon credit? Or it must span across many years. Any contracted store CO2s must, in the soil, generate a credit, must span across many years and endure many renters or operators to assure approved practices. Comment a little about that. Who should own that, the landowner or the grower?
Mark, I can talk a little bit about how we've addressed that within the Bayer program, and definitely invite others to weigh in here. So within the contract for the Bayer program, the contract is with the farmer or the operator with an understanding that they've got the right approvals from the landowner to generate carbon credit on their ground. And then we work with the carbon registries, who are actually the groups that generate those carbon credits. And then through our contract, the farmer gives the right for ownership of those carbon credits to Bayer. And with the understanding, right, it can take multiple years for for a carbon credit to be generated on that ground, which is one of the differentiators of our program in the marketplace. Since we're paying by practice, it's a yearly payment post verification validation that those practices were put in place.
Thanks, Lisa. Anyone else have any comments? Or so, Bill, I might turn to you. I've got a question that there's two questions. USDA is a credit buyer, and that's an interesting comment. And maybe associated with that is there a compendium of best farm level low CI practices that can be used as biofuel advocates to show that biofuels have a key role in a net zero future?
So USDA is a credit buyer, I think, is an interesting concept, and certainly not there yet. They may be there, but that could be one way to be able to either address some of the early adopter piece or the smaller farmer piece. So we'll see whether that comes about. And then to come up with those practices, there are private efforts out there. Ron shared, some of those tools to be able to look at. Most of those have some sort of numeric standards to them, although again, some of these, looking at fertilizer, that's going to have the same amount in different places. But looking at soil and practices, if we're going to look at soil carbon, that may be different between corn growing in North Dakota and corn growing in Louisiana, because soil conditions are different, winters are different, other kinds of things. So really, Growing Climate Solutions Act is about trying to come up with some of those standards. But in the meantime, if we do get CARB to go along with some things, as Ron laid out, I think there'd be some opportunities to be able to look at some of those practice changes, fertilizer changes, fuel reductions, other kinds of things other than soil that could be that there is some numbers around that. I don't have those, but there are numbers in models around that.
Ron, maybe it's a double question, and then Tim, I'm going to come to you. I've got a question for you as well. It appears nitrogen fertilizer appears to have the lowest or largest impact on CI for corn farmers. What nitrogen fertilizer has the lowest CI? And then related to that, do you see value in moving away from fossil synthetic fertilizers?
Absolutely. There's some nitrogen manufacturers out there now that are making moves for what they call green nitrogen. They're getting their hydrogen from electrolysis, from wind power. So that's eliminating the fossil fuel input out of that. And when you compare the different fertilizer types or the different fertilizer forms, we got ammonia, anhydrous ammonia, we got urea, we got nitrate, and we've got UAN, urea ammonium nitrates. There's a large difference in carbon footprint between those different forms. And nitrous ammonia has got by far the lowest carbon footprint because there's just less manufacturing. And as everybody knows, everybody uses anhydrous ammonia to produce urea and urea ammonium nitrate and other forms. So it's just got a naturally lower footprint. So if you're serious about reducing your carbon footprint from nitrogen, you use as much anhydrous ammonia as you can. You inject it in the soil. You apply it at the right time, side dress type thing, or late spring is preferable. And so you're using the lowest CI form of nitrogen, and you're applying in a manner that minimizes nitrous oxide emissions. So you can shave off between the two, between nitrogen manufacturing and nitrous oxide, about half the total footprint, so 7-8 grams.
And Ron, maybe in addition, certainly if you have access to manures, those are opportunities to be able to further decrease that nitrogen footprint, right?
That's for sure. Yeah. No fossil fuel involved with manures.
So, Tim, I'm going to kind of jump to you. Any thoughts on the most likely program to adopt soil carbon sequestration crediting?
And if anybody else wants a shot at that question.
The most likely one, change in tillage practices. That's the most likely and most universal. But to the point that Bill and Ron just made about looking at the whole farm's carbon footprint, not just on change of practices in terms of your tillage and agronomy practices, but operational practices as well. Is shifting to biodiesel for your machinery, talking to your truckers, talking to and securing carbon-free or solar power or carbon-free program for your utility, or putting on your own solar array behind the milk house. I mean, there's lots, and that's what the program in Wisconsin is intended to do, is to offer that type of flexibility so that the farm operator can look at it as alternatives, figure out what pencils out as a standalone investment, and also reduces their carbon footprint.
Thanks. Ron, I got a question back for you. It says, how are your soil carbon storage credits calculated, and how does the concept of additionality affect accounting for carbon credits?
You know, in the low carbon, I do almost all my work and look at the low carbon fuel markets, and additionality doesn't exist in those markets. If you can produce that corn and that biofuel, and not corn yet, that we hope is coming, but if you can produce that biofuel with using less carbon emissions than fossil fuel, diesel and gasoline, you generate credits based on that difference. So there's no additionality in that at all. The soil carbon thing, I look at several models. There's a real good, easy to use online model called the Michigan State University Cropland Greenhouse Gas Calculator. It's got 3 inputs for you stick in your crop, you stick in your yield, you stick in your tillage practice, and you pick the county that you're in. So it gets in the climates and soils factors and all that stuff, and it spits out a number for soil carbon sequestration. And that's what I used in those pie charts. There's other good models, Century model, not as easy to use, Descent, DNDC model, but all these soil carbon models have strong validation. They've been working on these models for decades, and they're very good, and even validated with lots of soil test information out of the major soil testing labs in the United States, which just about all of them show a nice uptrend in average soil organic matter content across the Midwest. So the good actors out there that are reducing tillage and growing high yield corn are making a difference. And it's, you know, when you see that trend and it keeps going up, you don't worry about the permanence so much. It's happening as we speak.
That's great response, Ron. Lisa, any comments, any further thoughts on that? The effect of carbon credits, additionality carbon credits. And then maybe just give us a wrap up on your side.
Yeah, from my side, and great panel here today, Mark, with a lot of diverse perspectives, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. But I would just really encourage farmers to take a look at the different programs that are out there. This space is continuing to evolve. It's probably going to look different, you know, next month from now, and especially 1 to 5 years. So make sure farmers take the time, explore. But I would encourage, you know, farmers to maybe enroll a field into a program, adopt some of these practices and see how it goes, and learn quickly here, because this space is evolving so rapidly.
Bill, final thoughts?
I would agree with Lisa. Step in and try some things, and certainly I think there's opportunities to be able to learn, figure out some differences with fertility, maybe see if you can find some manures out there. Certainly looking at tillage practices and different types of cover crops, figure out if those can work. Be ready as those opportunities come to know whether you can to climb into those or not, what works for you and your farm. So I really do think this has legs. We'll still be talking about it. It'll still probably be evolving 5 and 25 years from now. But we've got a lot of evolution to happen yet. But jump in.
It sounds like we're ready for action. Tim, your group is starting next week. Any final comments?
It is. If you're interested, reach out to your FSA, your NRCS, tell your banker, tell your accountant, tell your input providers that you're looking at doing this and that you're going to expect their help, and build a team to help you evaluate and execute.
Awesome. Ron, I'm going to turn to you for a final comment, and then Kelly, we'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, you know, if I could encourage folks, corn farmers out there, to really become acquainted with models that calculate your carbon footprint and start doing it. The American Coalition for Ethanol just went live with a simplified corn production and corn ethanol carbon calculator that's based on the US DOE GREET model. It's pretty easy to use. Jump in there and see how you compare to Midwest average. I think you might be surprised. There's a lot of good actors out there that are growing their corn for half the carbon intensity than others are, so, or than Midwest average, because, and part of that's the reason is the US Midwest average is based on quite old numbers. You know, USDA data from 10 to 20 years ago, and as we know, this is a changing industry.
Thanks, Ron. Kelly?
Yeah, I guess I'd just make the comment that farmers need to figure out a best way to collect their data from their farms. We've got a lot of technology nowadays. I know our planter, our smart firmers tell us our organic matter, our soil moisture, our trash in the furrows, our soil temperatures, and we've got the opportunity to collect some pretty impressive data to prove our farming practices are sustainable and capturing carbon. For me, the organic matter improvements, I'd really like to know the score, or what 1% of organic matter sequesters for carbon, because I think if you get a score of 6.5% organic matter, that's going to have a lot more nutrient holding capability, a lot better moisture holding capability. Just try to figure out the best position for your farming operation, because I do know we're all different and we're all in different parts of the country, and soils are different everywhere. So just figure out the best way to collect your data from your farm. Thank you.
You're a zero carbon corn farmer, Kelly, I'll guarantee it. If you're sequestering that much SOC, you're way below zero.
Thanks, Ron. That's what our goal is, and we're going to continue to push forward to get better. Yeah. So.
You know, we've shared so much information today, and we look forward to the change ahead. And I think, you know, from a farmer perspective, from an industry perspective, it's really great that we've had the time to share this information. Eco-engineers, we stand ready to help the business and ag work together to combine these markets. It's going to take everyone and a collaboration for this. And as Shashi stated at the beginning, we're ready to assist through our 360 approach to clean energy economy. And if this has sparked anything or any way that we can help you, we certainly want to hear from you. I want to one last time thank this panelist. They dedicated a lot of time, but they're also dedicating their lives to really the things that they believe in. And that is this low carbon, clean energy future. So thanks again. Lindsay, I'm turning it back to you.
Thanks, Mark. I don't really have anything else to say to follow that up. Thank you to all the panelists and everybody who's attended. And we'll see you next time around.